The once proud abbey of St. Clewyd the Refulgent has stood in ruins for over a century, racked by weird energies and haunted by wicked spirits. Several missions have set out to reclaim the abbey and quell the forces of chaos. All have failed. Yet those weird energies seem to have suddenly lessened. Could the time be right to reclaim the abbey and its holy relics? That's the premise of The Ruined Abbey of St. Clewyd for Dolmenwood from Necrotic Gnome and Exalted Funeral. And I'll share my review right after this. Howdy, gang, and welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. My old school Renaissance themed month of March continues, as today I will be sharing my review of The Ruined Abbey of St. Clewyd for Dolmenwood from Necrotic Gnome and Exalted Funeral. This is written by Gavin Norman and Yves Jen. Hopefully I've pronounced Eve's name correctly. The 52-page A5-sized hardcover with PDF carries an MSRP of $15. If you want to score just the PDF, you can do so over at DriveThruRPG for $7.50. Having said all that, let's swing on over to the other camera, because here I've got The Ruined Abbey of St. Clewyd for Dolmenwood. A few things to mention before we get stuck in. First of all, my friends over at Exalted Funeral were kind enough to provide me with this review copy, but neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share this review with you. It's important you know that. We're also not going to look at each and every page of the book, but I do want to give you a really good feel for what you're going to find inside. Then lastly, this is an adventure. So if you're a player and your referee has pick this up, maybe they just haven't started running it yet, maybe they're talking about picking this up, keep in mind there are spoilers ahead. You have been warned. Now, of course, if your referee is kicking around picking this up, let them know about this review. That way they can approach The Ruined Abbey of St. Clewyd and make a far more informed buying decision. First thing we're going to do is take a peek at the credits page. A lot of folks worked very hard to bring this to life. So let's give credit where credit is due. Something I always dig about the Dolmenwood adventures I've seen to this point, and Old School Essentials adventures, the maps up front, on the end pages, very nice. And the maps are always very, very cool. I want to say my pal Glenn Seal did these maps. So the adventure itself, it takes place in Dolmenwood. If you're not familiar with Dolmenwood, it is a dark fairy tale role-playing game, very old school in its mentality. I have reviewed the 3 core books for Dolmenwood. They are fantastic. One of my favorite role-playing game releases of last year. So check that out. Now, something else about this adventure is that you can easily utilize this with just about any old school Renaissance retro clone out there. You can use it with Old School Essentials without having to convert much at all. So that's pretty cool as well. Something else I like about Dolmenwood is it is a region that's not massive. So you can also drop it into any fantasy role-playing setting you want. You don't necessarily have to create your own world that Dolmenwood occupies. Of course, if you want to keep all your adventuring in the forest and its surrounding regions, you can certainly do that as well. So the premise here is this abbey to St. Clewyd was overtaken by these dark energies. Now, there are various different evil factions vying for control of Dolmenwood, as well as other factions such as the Pluritine Church, who are looking to reclaim various different shrines and abbeys that have been overtaken by these evil forces. And funny enough, the weird energies that have prevented anyone from really getting back into this abbey don't have anything to do with those dark forces who are vying for power. I thought that was kind of a cool little wrinkle to the proceedings going on. Now, there is the Nag Lord. That's one of the factions in Dolmenwood who wants to take possession of this abbey because it lays close to a ley line, but they really have nothing to do with what's been going on at this abbey. So for about 100 years, no one's been able to get inside this area until recently. The weird energies have dissipated to some extent, and now the Pluritine Church thinks that this might be a good time to send adventurers in there to at least reclaim holy relics, maybe even reclaim the abbey itself. Now, that's one of the hooks. A couple other hooks. We've got one of the player characters is experiencing visions. That's what drives the group to the abbey. We also have the opportunity for the player characters to just be treasure hunters. And they go to the abbey because they think, hey, you know what? They might be able to find a pretty big score there. So you've got a few different options on how the player characters get introduced to the adventure. The adventure itself is broken up over 3 major areas. I honestly think this will take at least 3 good length sessions to complete, maybe even quite a bit more, depending on how much role-playing your players like to get into. But I would think you've got at least 3 sessions of play because this is a fairly long tale. So, which I appreciate a lot. This is not some one shot that you're just going to bust out and 4 hours later complete. Should also point out that if you're a referee, you are going to want to read this in its entirety before you start to run it. Now, of course, because this is a Dolmenwood adventure, this is presented very nicely for the referee to run right out of the book without having to jump around a lot. So as an example, a lot of the keyed locations will actually show the map, a close-up of that map area, so that you don't have to keep flipping back and forth to the front or the back or some other map that's inside here. And then, of course, everything is presented pretty much as bullet points. There is not a lot of fluff that's in the Dolmenwood adventures. They get right to the point and make life a lot easier for the referee. But having said that, I would not recommend just picking this up and trying to run it with your players, because there are some things that interact together that you need to know about. So your player characters are going to explore the upper area, the above ground area of the Abbey. Then they'll go below ground. And then there's also a crypt area. Something I thought was really interesting here too. We have a lot of the monks from the Abbey. They're still alive. They're not zombies. They're just undying. Very interesting here too, because then we start getting into some faction play because they are at odds with each other. I thought that was nicely done. And then, of course, they're going to run into an avatar of St. Clewyd and the monster that he defeated, who have kind of joined together as one insane being. So there are some really interesting decisions for the player characters to make. We also have some cool monsters, some cool NPCs, some nice set pieces here, interesting magic items also. So all in all, with the right referee, I think people are going to have an absolute blast playing the ruined Abbey of St. Clewyd. There's a lot here, and there are a lot of cool decisions that have to be made by your players regarding their characters and what they do with the inhabitants who remain inside the Abbey. So very, very well done. Production quality is what we've come to expect from Exalted Funeral. Nice, thick paper stock. Artwork pops. The layout is fantastic, making life super easy on the referee, etc. All right, let's swing on over to the other camera so I can share some final thoughts as well as my review score. I've got to say that the Ruined Abbey of St. Clewyd is my absolute favorite of the Dolmenwood adventures that I've had an opportunity to take a peek at. I have the first 4. I have my review of the 4th adventure on the horizon. Now, me saying the Ruined Abbey of St. Clewyd being my favorite doesn't necessarily mean the other adventures are bad. No, it just happens to be my favorite. I think this adventure has the most going on out of the 4 Dolmenwood tales I've had a chance to check out. I love the fact that all of the Dolmenwood adventures are presented in a way to make life easy for the referee. Also, keep in mind, there are no through-line plots that the referee needs to follow. It's all emergent play. Now, there are some options on what happens at the end, depending on what the characters do throughout the adventure, but there's nothing set in stone. I love the fact that we've got some faction play with various different monks. This is not necessarily a super combat-heavy adventure either. Sure, there's plenty of action, but there's also some investigation going on, some exploration going on too, and I love that as well. I really dig Dolmenwood. If you haven't checked out my review of the 3 core books, by all means, please do. It was one of my favorite role-playing game releases of last year, so keep that in mind. I am a big fan. So on a scale of 0 to 10, I give Dolmenwood, the Ruined Abbey of St. Clewyd, a 10 out of 10. It is excellent. If you are picking up Dolmenwood, if you already have Dolmenwood, but you haven't bought this, it's a must-have in your collection. If you are running some other old school Renaissance retro clones out there, you should definitely take a peek at this and incorporating this adventure into your fantasy world as well. All right, that is it for this time out. If you enjoy the Gaming Gang and would like to support the outlet, you can do so in a few ways. First, by utilizing our affiliate links to the One Bookshelf sites, such as DriveThruRPG. To do so, simply visit thegaminggang.com, click on one of our ads. That way, if you happen to make a purchase, I get 5% of that sale as a commission. And all those commissions really do add up and help keep thegaminggang.com around. You can also make a one-time donation by way of PayPal and become a member of our Patreon. You'll find links down in the show notes. Also, down in those show notes, you'll find an invite link to our Discord server. It's absolutely free to sign up, so be sure to hang with the gang over on Discord. Of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you are not going to find here on YouTube. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. If you like the video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring that bell, because it'll not only let you know when I share videos such as this review, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings right here on YouTube at 7 p.m. Central as I bring you the latest in tabletop role-playing game news and more. Thank you very much for watching. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer, and until I see you next time, I certainly hope all of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.